Well, if your ride's broke down and looking sad, got a clunker car that's just plain bad, don't you fret, don't you worry, don't you sass. Just bring it on down to Chad's Whiskey Gas. He's Chad, he's wild, he's got the speed, fixing up rust buckets, planting a new seed in the Whiskey Gas garage. You know it's true, he'll get that old forgotten clunker feeling brand new.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Whiskey Gas Garage. My name is Chad Scott and I'm your host, and we are here to back on the Triumph. The Triumph. So we taken some oomph out of the Triumph, as we mentioned in the last episode. We've kind of chopped down the quarters, the back. Today we're going to focus on getting this nose clip off. Now, we've done some measuring because you should measure occasionally. What we're looking for is the right distance between the back of the firewall and the front of the radiator. That's going to tell us, because what we know is you're probably going to save this firewall. So as we take this firewall, we're going to cut the firewall essentially out except the dash part of the YUGO. So when we do the chassis swap, when we do the body over here and set it down, it's going to set right in here between what is going to be the nose cone here. Because this nose cone, really the only thing from here forward was the condenser and the pump, the cooler for the transmission fluid. So that was all that was here. We know that we've got to get as tight as we can to this. So I've loosened up the radiator, pushed it back. We're going to clip this out, and then we're going to take the nose cone down, and then take all this front part off. Well, the old nose clip is gone. So you remember when I said the only thing behind that nose cone, the condenser, and then of course down there in the floor is the automatic transmission cooler. It turns out there was a brake line. What? That far in front of the brakes is a brake line. So, coming off your master cylinder here, your router, it goes out to all your stuff. Apparently it came all the way out here to the front. Of course, my glove is just full of brake fluid because it was dripping out. It was below where my master cylinder was. So got that fixed. But so yeah, I'm going to run that brake line. Apparently it goes all the way around here from the distribution block and over to this brake. So we get a new brake line. Hey, to be fair, it probably needed a new brake line. So, but we did get the entire front clip off there. As you see, those are some pretty stout pieces of metal. Had to get the old grinder out. Hercules! Had to get the grinder out and grind those pieces off just to make that happen. But that is about where we need it to be. So if we look over here at the old YUGO, the old YUGO doesn't have quite as much room. So we're going to be cutting all of this out. So all the shock towers, we're going to be cutting right along here when we separate this body here at this pinch weld on both sides. And then we'll be taking the shock towers out and literally just lifting the body off. We'll be taking the front of the YUGO nose, this whole nose clip here all the way down to the bottom. That's going to come with the body and the headlights, and all that stays with the YUGO. And we're just going to essentially remove all of this and lift it off. So we've got about the same distance between there and there as we have between here and now here. Once we took that off, so you can almost see it. You can almost see that being sort of that flat front end of the YUGO, where the YUGO body will go, and then the radiator will sit right there, and it will open up just like it does in front of the YUGO, so the radiator can work there. So next thing we got to do is got to get this old windshield off. I'm sure don't worry, I wrote down where every one of those wires go to. I did not, because we're not going to be using those wires, or so I think. Actually, one of them goes to the fuel pump. To be fair, I'm not sure which one. We'll figure it out. We got a book. We can definitely figure this out. So we've got the challenge is right here. Right here is the pump that I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it runs the windshield washer fluid. Because that's what goes right there. But that, I don't know. It's in brass line, which tells me it could also be the fuel pump. So we got to figure that out. Maybe we'll read. That would be new for this whole project. So remember, we could take all of that out through the firewall there, because we won't be putting that hood latch back in there. But we got to keep the master cylinder. We got to keep the booster. We got to keep all those things that keep this car running in place. So let's move on to the next little piece of this project. We got to cut that windshield out and try not to break it. We'll probably break it. But hey, comment down below if you think we're going to break it. I'd like to know. And I'll know when you commented, because no, I have no idea. But we're going to try that anyway. All right, we'll see you in just a few minutes. So through the work of precision instrumentation, and by that I mean, a grinder, the wheel of death, the old Sawzall, my first piece of broken glass. Of course, you got to have a crowbar and a sledgehammer. So between those four things, we've been able to remove most of the body off this car. Now we still got to lop the rest of this fender off. We have not gotten to that yet. And then we got to take some pretty precise measurements to lop these quarters off here, or the rockers off. We got to rock those down to the right, because we're going to put a piece of steel back in there that the new body will rest on, that it's, again, just a little bit narrower. So we know we have that left to do. Now we've got a quandary here. So the gas tank is back here. It's, I don't know, 10, 12 gallons, whatever it is. It's much bigger than the 6-gallon YUGO tank. And if we leave that in, then we turn our YUGO essentially into a two-seater. But if we do that, then we could take this area back here that we're not going to utilize, and which would be on the YUGO, would be sort of past the back seat. So imagine the back seat gone in the YUGO, past the back seat back here to the back deck lid, and we could actually put one of the 12-volt air conditioners back there like they have in trucks. Now, this did have an air conditioner. We didn't know if it was good or not. We pulled the condenser. The condenser was bad, had some holes in it from what was clearly a wreck underneath the front of the car that you couldn't see until you got up underneath it, but clearly it happened. So we may just end up keeping this, making the YUGO a two-seater, and then chopping the back end off so it is able to be the right size for the YUGO. It means we'll put in the back, we'll put a higher, so the gas cap is low back here, put a higher place up on probably around here as a fill tube for the old YUGO that kind of goes down and around to fill that up, and then just make the old YUGO a two-seater. Remember, the idea was to bring the YUGO back to life for two reasons. One, power tour. So we had always wanted to build a YUGO for Power Tour in June of next year. And, we're on a timeline, maybe to finish that. There's a lot going on with this. And then secondly, we want to run it in 24 hours of lemons, a couple of races next year. So we're going to be putting a roll cage in it anyway, and a few other safety things. Of course, all of this will be YUGO. We'll likely keep the Triumph steering column, but we'll transfer everything YUGO to it. There's a lot that has to happen. So I think that's where we'll leave it for this week. I appreciate you guys watching Whiskey Gas Garage. I'm Chad Scott, and as always, I'm going to be your host. Oh, before we go, PSS. We did fire this thing back up. I didn't have it on camera, but I wanted to see at this point, does the damn thing still run? And the fact is, yes, it runs perfectly. Now, mind you, we didn't have a radiator or anything, but it started up on its own, pulled fuel out of the tank. So we at least, even with all of this wires, again, we know where every one of these wires goes. We have no idea. So it starts and runs fine. So truly, there's very little you really need in a car to get it starting and running when it's carbureted. It's not TBI, or it's not some crazy fuel-injected system. The YUGO has about 350 feet of wiring in the whole car. 350 feet of wiring in the entire wiring harness on the YUGO. The Triumph TR7 had about almost 500. It had some more fancy stuff in the air conditioning, and it had about 500. A modern car, and I'll use my wife's Bronco as an example, has nearly 4,000 feet of wire in the wiring harnesses in the car, and all the intelligent stuff. So, you got a lot of wire in these cars that, gosh, you need it all in these modern cars, not so much in these, and we are going to really limit the wiring. We're going to try to keep everything off the YUGO the way it is and just plug and play with the big stuff, and then we'll fish through all this wiring up here on the dash. We'll get what we need to run the motor, and then everything else we'll just run hot leads off of what we find out is hot up here. We'll run it to the power box in the YUGO, which is located right there in the YUGO. So there'll be some electrical stuff, but not a ton, because we're going to use all the switches and plugs and stuff in the YUGO, and that's all just rocker switches. There are like 5 rocker switches that control the whole car. So we're going to do it that way. All right, guys, we'll see you next time on Whiskey Gas Garage.
Well, if your ride's broke down and looking sad, got a clunker car, it's just plain bad. Don't you fret, don't you worry, don't you sass. Just bring it on down to Chad's Whiskey Gas. He's Chad, he's wild, he's got the speed.